Advanced Heroquest, The Secret Passage, Part 1. Their jailer, Cronthog Hornhelm, and many of his minions were dead, leaving the dwarf Sven Hammerhelm and the barbarian Lambert Lemberger to saunter out of his prison unmolested. Beyond the main door there is a sentry room, but there is no need to worry. It is rare for anyone to be there, as nearby there is a larger guard room where they all congregate and carouse constantly. We need not go that way, dwarf, for in the corridor linking the two, there is a secret door to a passage that'll take us straight up to the ground floor. Lemberger explained as they walked.
Understood, but whilst I have you in a talkative mood, Manlin, I do have a question. Something that's been buzzing about like a hoverfly in my helm since our fight with our captor.
Lemberger suddenly narrowed his eyes, suspicious, yet he nodded his agreement. Ask away, dwarf. I owe you my freedom. The least I can do is answer a question or two.
I heard what Hornhelm said to you about you being a child killer. What did he mean? I heard some things about such a prisoner in the tavern before I came on this expedition.
Oh, really? In the tavern? Nothing but unfounded rumours lie at the heart of much tavern banter, dwarf. Mostly false news from lying pamphleteers. Pay neither Hornhelm nor them any mind. I'll explain it all better once we are out of this jail, eh? Sven Hammerhelm nodded, although Lemberger sensed incredulity in the gesture. The two continued to walk in silence until they reached the door out. Sven coughed, cleared his throat, and then inserted the key he'd pulled from the decapitated body of Cronthog Hornhelm into the lock.
And into freedom we go,
the dwarf triumphantly proclaimed to his ally. That's right, dwarf. But now I think it is time for me to pay off my debt to you with a fuller answer to your query. For I'm afraid that you've outlived your usefulness, the axeman coldly stated as he raised his weapon up high to strike Sven down.
So, it's true, you're Jacopo the head taker, the child murderer,
Sven growled. Ha! Ha! There are worse monikers, I suppose, dwarf. Not that you'll live long enough to tell anyone. Sven backed away from the barbarian, giving himself space to defend himself, and pushed the double doors out of the jail open as he did so. In this part of the expedition, the party has split into two rival halves, with one being the dwarf mercenary Sven Hammerhelm, and the other the serial killer known as Jacopo the Head Taker, aka Lambert Lemberger. Following their fight with Cronthog Hornhelm, Sven had been newly blessed with both his father's hammer and a dawnstone containing 7 fate points, and both he and Lambert had returned to full health, having imbibed the numerous adult beverages that had littered the Chaos Lord's lair. The two players effectively being against each other means that each turn we will have 2 hero phases before the GM takes their phase, with the order of the 2 hero phases determined by the roll of a d12 by each player, the winner of the roll deciding if they wish to take the first or second turn. In the case of a tie, the GM awards one of the players a +1 to their dice roll. The two former allies faced off against each other over the threshold of the way out of the jail. Sven glowered at his treacherous foe. There's nothing that irks a dwarf more than betrayal. The room that Sven had backed into was a medium-sized room with a weapons rack on the wall opposite, as well as a bronze statue of one of the founders of Tobaro in the corner. There was a single door out of the room. It was unoccupied, which was fortunate, as Sven had his hands full, facing off against his erstwhile ally. To begin with, the two players rolled off to see who got the initiative over the other, with Sven rolling a blue die and getting an 8, whilst Lemberger's red die came up 11. The barbarian flashed a malicious grin and raised his axe. The human had a weapon skill of 10 versus Sven's newly boosted weapon skill of 9. This meant that the axeman required a 6 to strike the dwarf, which he duly got, rolling an 11. The skillful slice sliding past Sven's attempts to parry the blow. However, next came the tricky part, getting through the tough enchanted armor of the dwarf, who had been granted an intimidating toughness of 11. Lambert rolled his 5 damage dice. 4 missed the mark, but 1, a critical no less, struck, allowing him to roll an additional die, although this failed to do anything more, resulting in Sven only taking a single wound. It was now Sven's chance to return the favour, and he readied his father's hammer. He required an 8 to strike his opponent, and sealed the deal with a 9. Lemberger had a toughness of 9 as well, so would again need a fine strike to inflict any damage. But that is exactly what Sven did, inflicting a whopping 4 wounds on the head taker of Tobaro. Lemberger staggered. The fight was not going the way the barbarian had envisioned at all, and he snarled in frustration as he saw blood trickling down his body. Lemberger moved to try and get past the troublesome dwarf, but found his way blocked, and so struck out at Sven once more. He again required a 6, and efficiently rolled a 7. However, all 5 of his damage dice failed to get through the dwarf's armor. Sven now attacked, but the bloodied Lemberger was ready, deflecting the blow with skill and practiced style. Lemberger took the opportunity to escape in both hands and dashed across the room to open the door on the far wall. It led out to a corridor 3 lengths long that ended in a large double door that Lemberger knew opened up to the nearby guard room. The dwarf's blood was up now, and he ran at the barbarian as fast as his little legs would let him. He hacked at his enemy with all his might, but his anger had gotten the better of him, and it was simplicity itself for Lemberger to dodge out of the way of the falling hammer. However, this turn of events did not mean that the head taker was going to stick around and fight it out. He needed to find the entrance to the secret passage, and in order to do that he needed the dwarf out of the way. And he had a cunning plan. Surely, a guard room full of guards would keep Sven occupied long enough for the barbarian to escape. And so, with this in his mind, he fled down the corridor, breaking into a run, but only adding an additional 3 squares to his movement. But he was sure that even this would outpace the death-dealing dwarf. He was wrong. Sven threw himself down the corridor like a charging boar, barreling his way after his foe. In a panic, Lemberger turned to face his pursuer and hacked at the panting, out-of-breath dwarf. catching Sven off his guard. The barbarian struck true and threw his 5 damage dice. However, 4 failed to wound, but 1 scored a critical hit, allowing him to roll another die. Alas though, this had no further effect, meaning that he had inflicted only a single wound on the dwarf once more. As the second part of his attack move action, he again fled, all the way to the double doors leading to the guard room. All he had to do next was open them up and slip past the dwarf in the ensuing mayhem. Sven was having none of it. He charged down the bloody barbarian with a righteous snarl upon his lips.
It is fortunate that you love killing and death so much, manlin, for I have plenty of each to serve up to you now.
Sven attacked, sliding past the human's defenses like a hot knife through butter. Sven's player rolled a critical to hit, followed by an 8, yet another hit, and rolled a whopping 12 damage dice against the itinerant serial killer. Sven required a 9, and he got it, causing 6 wounds, including 2 critical hits, which allowed him to roll a further 2 dice, which did no more damage though. But the inflicted damage was already easily enough to outright kill Lemberger. It was not a pretty end. It was bloody and messy, and it left the human all but unrecognizable. However, at Lemberger's death, the GM gave his player a chance to enact out his plan, to have a modicum of revenge. As the barbarian had reached the door to the guard room, the GM ruled that he had a 50-50 chance to open the doors up to the room with his dying breath. We rolled a 6-sided die. Upon 3 sides were circles, upon the other 3 were crosses. If a circle came up, then the doors opened. If it was a cross, then they would remain shut. Lemberger's player rolled, and it was a circle. The double doors suddenly flung open, and the pulped dead corpse of Lemberger tumbled onto the floor. The assembled guards stopped their drinking and shouting, dropped their tankards, unsheathed their weapons, and turned their full attention to the blood-splattered dwarf that now darkened their doorway. And as to you, Lambert Lemberger, we bid you adieu.